January 22, 1964. In the upscale Crocker Highlands neighborhood of Oakland, California, a mother and daughter walked through their front door and into a nightmare that would shock the city and reverberate across the Bay Area. Betty Martin, recently honored as Mother of the Year, and her daughter Carolyn had just returned from an ordinary errand. That evening they were found, bound, battered, and strangled. Their deaths shattered the illusion that privilege and respectability could ever guarantee safety. Hello, friends. My name is Marcia, and this is Midwest Murders, where we explore the mysteries that still haunt America. More than 6 decades later, the Martin case remains officially unsolved, yet the questions still demand answers. Who shattered the safety of this well-protected home, and why has justice remained elusive? It happened at a time when the nation was still reeling from the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, and the civil rights movement was reshaping American life. Oakland, like much of the country, was a city in transition, caught between comfort and change, between the old world and the new. To understand what was lost that night, we need to step back into early 1960s Oakland and into the everyday life of the Martin family. In the early 1960s, Oakland was a city of contrasts. Crocker Heights, where the Martins lived, represented order and affluence. Tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, and homes that reflected confidence in a safe, stable future. But just beyond those quiet streets in nearby Berkeley, students organized sit-ins and freedom marches, and those same calls for change echoed across Oakland's streets and schools. It's against this backdrop that the Martin family tragedy would begin. Mary Elizabeth Martin, age 42, known to everybody as Betty, was a quiet, unassuming woman, yet she spoke in public with dignity and poise. Deeply respected, she was an elder at the First Presbyterian Church, chairwoman of the Oakland Council of Churchwomen, and the president of the Orpheus Men's Choir Auxiliary, where her husband Frank sang. Her civic dedication earned her the title of Oakland's Mother of the Year just months before the murder. The Martins' 12-room, white stucco home at 1140 Ashmount Avenue was filled with music. A baby black grand piano dominated the living room, and every family member could play. Betty also collected bells from around the world, a reflection of her extensive travels. Dr. Francis Frank Martin was a well-known osteopath, a tall, serious man who rarely smiled, but was admired by patients and colleagues alike. Together they raised 2 daughters. Carolyn Marie, 18, was a popular, conscientious girl who got good grades and had a flair for comedy. She was a quiet but very enthusiastic sophomore at Chico State College and had just completed her mid-year exams. She had arrived back home for winter break just the night before, her partially unpacked suitcase still sitting in her room. Susan, 17, a senior at Oakland High School, served proudly as a song girl for the pep squad, the kind of role that came with both responsibility and recognition. The 2 girls looked so much alike that people often thought they were twins. To their neighbors, the Martins were the picture of post-war American success: faithful, cultured, respectable, and safe. Wednesday, January 22, 1964 began like any other winter day in Oakland, cold, damp, and uneventful. Dr. Martin left for his office at 8 a.m., dropping Susan off at school. With little else planned for the day, Betty and Carolyn took the family's small black and white dog, TD, short for touchdown, to the vet near the airport. Clinic records showed TD received his distemper shot at 9:45 a.m., and the pair left shortly after. If they returned home directly, they would have arrived around 10:20 a.m. Police later theorized that Carolyn entered first through the side door near the garage and was attacked almost immediately. Betty followed, sitting down her purse and car keys on the counter, but still holding her gloves, when the assault began. Whether the attacker forced his way inside or was someone they knew remains a haunting mystery. Hours passed before the discovery. Susan had stayed after school for song girl practice. When her boyfriend dropped her off at home at 5:30 p.m., she opened the front door and stepped into a scene no one should ever witness. Lying close together on the living room floor, not far from the grand piano, were the bodies of her mother and her sister. Their hands and legs were tied behind them, bound in a crude hog-tie fashion. Betty was dressed except for one shoe. Carolyn's shoes had been removed, her blouse and stretch pants ripped off and flung across the room. Broken pieces of a marble ashtray lay near Betty. Nearby sat TD, their loyal little dog, silent and unmoving. Detectives quickly arrived, collecting blood, fingerprints, and semen samples, but the case raised more questions than answers. There was no forced entry, no signs of robbery. Both purses, with cash and identification, were left untouched. With dozens of officers and 4 detectives assigned to the case, a 2-pronged investigation was launched, with some officers investigating local sex offenders while others questioned the Martins' friends and acquaintances. Hundreds of potential suspects, both pillars of the community and transients, were questioned. Dr. Martin was cleared. His office staff and patients accounted for his entire day. The medical examiner set the time of death between noon and 4 p.m., a troubling revelation. If the women arrived home around 10:20 a.m., the killer may have held them captive for as long as 2 to 3 hours. This lengthy period, where the killer maintained absolute control over Betty and Carolyn, binding them meticulously with cords and stockings, speaks to a calculated, terrifying act of domination. To this day, the unexplained time gap remains one of the most chilling aspects of this case. 6 months earlier, the same home had been burglarized. Oddly, nothing of real value was taken, just a lady's watch and some clothing, including lingerie, several nightgowns, and a slip. Police wondered, had the burglar returned? The investigation was exhaustive. More than 3,000 people were interviewed. 80 took polygraph tests. Still, no viable suspect emerged. 1,000 mourners filled the First Presbyterian Church for the funeral. Betty and Carolyn were cremated and their ashes returned to the family. Frank Martin stayed in the home until his death in 1991, but Susan, having faced the unimaginable sight, never returned, instead going to stay with friends. Only one person ever drew serious attention, a UC Berkeley student who knew Carolyn. Although investigators had no physical evidence tying the student to the murders, he piqued the interest of Oakland detective Jack Richardson. Detective Richardson went so far as to go undercover as a Berkeley student for a week, sitting near the person of interest hoping to overhear an admission of guilt. Authorities never revealed publicly exactly what the Berkeley student said or why it was deemed incriminating, and he is reportedly now deceased. When we look at this case, the biggest question that haunts me, and likely haunted the original investigators, is that substantial time gap. Why did the killer choose to hold Betty and Carolyn captive for such a long period of time, potentially hours, before ending their lives? This wasn't a crime of passion or a spontaneous act. The careful binding with both the extension cord used on Betty and the silk stockings used to bind Carolyn shows preparation and methodical control. Was the killer simply focused on the sexual assault of Carolyn, or was the psychological control itself the motivation? And who was the initial burglar? Was the theft of women's intimate apparel 6 months earlier connected to the slangs? Did the killer know the Martins and simply return to the scene of a previous fetish or desire? Given there was no forced entry, did Betty or Carolyn willingly let the killer into the house because they knew him? Or was he hiding, waiting to push his way in as the women entered, as police theorized? What was it that the UC Berkeley student who knew Carolyn said or did that led investigators to expend such great effort, including sending an officer undercover despite having no physical evidence to tie him to the murders? The evidence still exists, occasionally being resubmitted for modern testing, but investigators have never said whether a DNA profile has been built or entered into CODIS. The Mother of the Year murders shattered Oakland's sense of safety. This case reminds us that violence doesn't respect social standing or privilege. Betty Martin was a woman of faith and service. Carolyn was bright, witty, and full of promise. Their final moments played out in the very place meant to protect them, their own home. Though the headlines have faded, the loss remains profound, and Oakland investigators persevere, struggling to provide Carolyn and Mrs. Martin the justice that has so long eluded them. Until the truth comes to light, that elegant home on Ashmount Avenue stands as a silent witness to a crime that forever changed a family and a city. If you have any thoughts or theories about this case, please share them in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and may the truth reveal itself in the shadows.